Hey everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. This is another installation of the Occultism series, and this time around I wanted to talk, since I think it's a good follow-up to 2 episodes ago I talked about alchemy, and I didn't really go heavy into herbalism, largely because it doesn't have the same occult association as a lot of other things. Nowadays, good lord, especially essential oils, they're so mainstream that people almost roll their eyes at how many campaigns there are for that. It seems like every other person you know dabbles in it, at the very least. But I think herbalism is still pertinent with regard to occultism, even though it's more firmly grounded in a more materialist and scientific method-related worldview, largely because some of the applications of herbs aren't really a question of physiological response, and they're more a question of psychological response, and that can absolutely have applications in both a spiritual setting and, by extension, an occult setting. And a great example of two herbs that I think, one is very firmly grounded in materialism and one's firmly grounded in occultism, would be willow bark and mugwort. Because talk about two vastly different uses of herbs, but also very common. You can find both at your local health food store, or probably even Walmart in some iteration or another. And what's interesting about it is, let's look at willow bark. Willow bark has been used for centuries, if not millennia, as a painkiller, and that's because it contains salicin, which can be altered into salicylic acid. And both of those applications have different effects on the body in regards to how it perceives pain. And some people argue, and I actually tend to agree, that salicin, the actual herbal remedy itself, is actually less harmful because it doesn't have a lot of the side effects associated with salicylic acid, which is what we normally associate with its use as a painkiller. This is one of those things that nobody would debate if they knew three things about either plants in their medical applications, or just medicine in general. Every now and again somebody might wave their hand and dismiss the use of salicin just if they're hearing it in a more new agey context. But if they actually understood how it worked physiologically, they wouldn't have any fuss about it, because it's something that has common use by pharmacies around the world. Nobody's going to wave their hand and dismiss aspirin as a pain remedy. That being said, now we switch over to mugwort and compare the two. What is mugwort used for in herbalism? Well, the biggest thing is to increase the likelihood, and I've personally ascribed to it myself, I've mentioned it many times, is that it helps with having more vivid dreams, increasing the likelihood of lucid dreams, and just delving more into your subconscious, like what might be bothering you. Because you're gonna have, to use a more ancient term, you're gonna have visions. You're gonna be more likely to have a very memorable dream, be it positive or negative, and you can analyze that for your own use. And if you're getting interested in lucid dreaming, especially as a way to deal with sleep paralysis, which again, highly recommend as a personal sufferer of that condition, mugwort can be extremely useful. And the reason why I mention this is, we know for a fact, it's also grounded in materialism. It's also grounded in science. We know that it has that effect on people. We know this. We understand the compounds that are responsible. But if you think about its uses, who's going to go to a doctor and say, "Hey doc, I'm having really bad dreams, or I've been dealing with sleep paralysis. I told my family I was getting abducted by aliens and they didn't believe me. You got anything for that?" No, they don't have anything for that. They're going to give you psychotic pills, antipsychotics. That's a very subjective problem. Problems that deal with the mind in ways that don't have that cut and dry, this is absolutely something wrong with your perception of reality, and you need this. Like, for example, truly antipsychotic medication, medication for bipolar, medication for schizophrenia, things of that sort. When you're just dealing with everyday problems that someone who is neurotypical might have to contend with, there's not a lot of options in the materialist worldview. There's not. Whereas in the occult worldview, it's a much more plausible argument to seek external remedies for internal issues, abstract issues. In other words, you're taking a concrete physical substance to deal with a abstract problem that can't be directly identified, be it an emotion or some sort of external stressor or even an internal stressor. And mugwort can help tremendously with that. And I'm actually probably going to break this down into 2 videos. I think next week I'm going to address much more debatable and very observable and very severe plants, like plant medicine, as some people call it in more New Age circles, ayahuasca and whatnot. But today I'm focusing more on the more routine, your grandma's plant medicine. Mugwort is great in that regard. That being said, maybe the issue is not dreams themselves, but simply people who tend to deal with anxiety, it gets worse throughout the day, right? Well, there are means of dealing with that. Chamomile, particularly German chamomile, is often associated with insomnia and something that people can do. And I think a lot of people, especially men, are very inclined to dismiss it because there's that association, like chamomile, that's what my grandma drinks before bed. But it's wonderful. It has a terrific remedy for insomnia in it. And likewise, one that I never really see, but I absolutely love, verbena. A blend of chamomile and verbena is just terrific for any kind of sleep problem, assuming it's not something severe like sleep apnea. There's a lot of plants that have those kinds of calming associations with them. And it's something that I think that it's easy to simultaneously overlook because it's so common, but also to neglect because of the negative associations with using something like that instead of a pill. And I understand that. I absolutely. I mean, if you've never taken Benadryl before and you've only chewed valerian root, and you take Benadryl and see which one will knock you out quicker. Unless you have a opposite response, which some people do, that diphenhydramine HCl and Benadryl is going to lay you out. And similarly, melatonin, which I'm a little concerned about its overprescription. By prescription, I don't even mean by doctors. It's overuse is what I really mean. Simply because we don't know the long-term effects of using it. And by the way, that's not me saying don't use it. I've used it. It's just, by the way, I use the vegetarian kind because I'm a little creeped out by the idea of just sleeping because I have something that a cow needs to sleep, because that's how they get the regular standard variety. I'm not a vegetarian, but I don't want to have like cow brain pills. So, and it's purely emotional, by the way. It's not a logical response why I'm saying that. But if I do take melatonin, I take the vegetarian version. That being said, which is synthesized, by the way, in a lab. That's how they make it. There's no natural source of melatonin in any kind of plant product, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, that pretty much just covers just the gist of how herbs can be applied for psychological, emotional, abstract problems, which I think absolutely, even though it's not pseudoscience, even though it is firmly grounded in the scientific method, it does lend itself more, because you're dealing with abstractions, it does lend itself more towards occultism, towards esotericism, rather than just a mundane practice. And this goes double when you're using herbs to enter a specific psychological state. And I absolutely encourage people, if you want to dabble in that kind of thing, by all means, see what different herbs can do in terms of psychology. Classic example is, I'm a firm advocate, staunch advocate for meditation. I don't do yoga, but I think it's really great that some people do yoga also for similar reasons. Well, as I mentioned before, a lot of these herbs that I mentioned, verbena and chamomile particularly, they tend to help with insomnia. Well, if you're the kind of person who's not inclined to nod off during meditation, but instead you're contending with monkey mind, this is something that could help supplement that process and help you overcome that particular obstacle. So, If lately you've been under a lot of stress and meditating's a little harder and you're more inclined to find your mind wandering, hey, maybe brew a blend of verbena and chamomile or what have you and see where that takes you. Probably not better to use like Sleepy Time Extra or anything that's got valerian in it, because you probably will nod off, but some applications of plants in their use of altering not your physiology, but the your neurology, dealing with the mental state that you're in, can be conducive. And it's funny, it's easy to dismiss oh wow, chamomile before meditating, maybe I should have bathed the moon too. It does sound very unscientific, and yet so many people who have a purely materialist view, don't have any interest in anything remotely dealing with the mind abstractly or with spiritual matters or anything of the sort, they sure do love to change their mental state every day when they have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Caffeine is the most overused mentally altering compound in the world. Why not use other things? Why not experiment with other things that are equally harmless and equally of use to a person? Extremely versatile. There's the tea section of your local grocery store. It doesn't just have caffeine in it. There's all sorts of things that you can experiment with that won't have any negative long or short-term effects if you try them out. Absolutely worth looking at. I might even make a follow-up vid to this dealing with it in a purely non-occult manner. That being said, that's all I've got for now. Like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Next time we're going to deal with the heavier plants.